They called him the Dollmaker. In a quiet corner of San Diego, nestled between two crumbling buildings, stood his small, unassuming toy shop. It wasn't flashy, nor did it boast bright lights or bold signs. Just a dusty little wooden sign that read, Henry's Workshop, with a carved image of a doll holding a teddy bear. People walked by without giving it a second glance. But those who entered never quite left the same. Henry was a man of peculiar habits. He rarely ventured outside, always seen in his workshop, tinkering with tiny tools and muttering to himself. He had an unmatched talent for crafting toys, especially dolls. Every stitch, every stroke of paint, every carved smile seemed alive. It wasn't just skill, it was something more, something that lingered long after the toys left his shelves. One foggy evening, a young woman named Amy wandered into the shop. She wasn't there to buy anything. She had heard whispers in the neighborhood about the dollmaker's creations, rumors of toys that moved when no one was looking, dolls that whispered secrets in the dead of night. Amy was a journalist, and her curiosity always got the better of her. The shop bell chimed softly as she stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of sawdust and varnish. Rows of lifelike dolls sat on shelves, their glassy eyes gleaming in the dim light. Some smiled sweetly, others had expressions so intricate they almost seemed human. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. "Good evening," came a voice from behind the counter. Henry appeared, wiping his hands on a rag. His face was pale, his eyes sharp and calculating. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Evening," Amy replied, forcing a smile. "Your shop is fascinating." "Toys bring joy," Henry said, his voice soft but firm. "Every child deserves a friend." Amy's gaze drifted to a doll on the counter. It was exquisite, with auburn hair and a delicate lace dress. But its eyes, they seemed to follow her. She reached out hesitantly, but Henry's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. "Some toys aren't meant to be touched," he said, his grip like iron. Amy pulled back, her heart racing. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend." Henry's expression softened, and he let go. Curiosity is natural. But some secrets are better left undiscovered. She tried to hide her unease. "Actually, I'm a writer. I've heard about your work, and I was hoping to learn more. Maybe interview you?" Henry's smile returned, colder this time. "Stories are powerful things, Miss Amy. Sometimes, they take on a life of their own." Before she could respond, he walked to the back of the shop and disappeared behind a curtain. Amy stood there, unsure whether to follow or leave. But then she noticed a journal lying on the counter. It was old, its leather cover cracked and worn. Curiosity burned in her chest. She glanced around, Henry was nowhere to be seen. Carefully, she opened the journal. The pages were filled with sketches of dolls, each one more detailed than the last. But what caught her attention were the notes scribbled in the margins. Phrases like essence transfer successful and the subject shows signs of awareness. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, finding more chilling details. Dates, names, descriptions of people, and their fates. "I see you found my work," Henry's voice came from behind her. Amy jumped, slamming the journal shut. He stood there, his expression unreadable. In his hand was a small doll, its features eerily familiar. It looked just like her. "What is this?" Amy demanded, holding up the journal. "What are you doing here?" Henry sighed, setting the doll down gently. "You wouldn't understand. My creations aren't just toys. They're companions, imbued with a part of myself, and sometimes, others." Amy felt a wave of nausea. You're using people? Their souls?" He tilted his head, as if pondering her words. "Souls? No. Memories, emotions, fragments of life. Enough to give them purpose. To make them truly alive." She backed away, her eyes darting to the door. "That's insane." Henry stepped closer, his gaze intense. "Is it? Think about it, Amy. A world where no child is ever lonely, where every toy is a true friend. Isn't that beautiful? At what cost? She spat. You're playing God. He shook his head. I'm giving life to what would otherwise be lifeless. Isn't that what every creator strives for? Before she could reply, the dolls in the shop began to move. Slowly at first, their heads turning, their eyes blinking. Then, one by one, they began to whisper. The sound was faint, like leaves rustling in the wind, but it grew louder, more insistent. Amy's heart pounded as she backed toward the door. But when she reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. You wanted a story, Henry said, his voice almost tender. Let me show you. The lights flickered, and the room seemed to shift. Amy found herself standing in a different place entirely. It was a workshop, but much larger and darker than the one she had entered. The walls were lined with shelves, each one holding rows of dolls, all staring at her. What is this? She whispered. Henry's voice echoed around her. This is where the magic happens. Every doll here has a piece of someone. A memory, a feeling, a dream. They're alive, Amy. And they're waiting. She turned, trying to find him, but he was nowhere to be seen. The dolls began to move again, their whispers growing louder, forming words. Stay with us, Amy, they said in unison. You'll never be alone. Panic surged through her. She ran, weaving through the endless shelves, but the workshop seemed to stretch on forever. No matter which way she turned, she couldn't find the exit. Then, she saw it. Her doll, the one Henry had placed on the counter. It was standing on a shelf ahead, its glassy eyes fixed on her. She felt an inexplicable pull, as if it were calling to her. Against her better judgment, she reached out and picked it up. The moment she touched it, a flood of memories washed over her. Her childhood, her first heartbreak, her dreams of becoming a writer. It was as if the doll had taken a part of her, and now it held her very essence. Henry's voice came again, soft and soothing. Do you see now? You're a part of them, and they're a part of you. Isn't it beautiful? Amy clutched the doll, tears streaming down her face. Let me go. Please. He appeared before her, his expression gentle. You came seeking a story. But some stories demand a price. She looked around, the doll's whispers filling her ears. They weren't menacing, they were pleading, longing for connection. For a moment, she felt an overwhelming sense of empathy. But then she remembered the journal, the names, the lives taken. With a surge of determination, she hurled the doll to the ground, shattering it. The whispers stopped, and the room grew silent. Henry's expression darkened, and the walls began to crumble. Amy ran, the world around her dissolving into chaos. Just as she thought she would be swallowed by the void, she burst through the shop's front door and into the cold night air. She turned back, but the shop was gone. In its place was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. Clutching her chest, she took a shaky breath and walked away. Days later, she wrote about her experience. But every time she tried to publish the story, her computer would glitch, the file disappearing. It was as if the world didn't want the Dollmaker's secret to be revealed. But you've heard it now, haven't you? And maybe, just perhaps, one day, you'll find a doll that real.